You know that feeling when you get to the very bottom of a page and you suddenly realize you've completely zoned out? Like you have absolutely zero idea what you just read? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. It happens to all of us. But today, we're going to fix that. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into how we can stop being just passive consumers of text and actually become active, analytical decoders. Now, you might be thinking, if I push myself to read faster, won't my understanding naturally suffer? I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? We usually assume that slowing down and carefully reading word by word is the only way to really absorb information. After all, that's exactly how we were taught to read back in grade school, sounding out every single syllable just to make sure we got it right. But is that actually true? Well, our source material explicitly calls this out. It says, flat out, this is a false assumption. It turns out that as you learn to read faster, by chunking ideas together rather than reading single words, your comprehension actually improves. Instead of getting totally bogged down reacting to every individual word, a skilled reader responds to meaningful units of ideas. Think of chunking like looking at a whole sentence as one complete picture, rather than a super frustrating puzzle of individual letters you have to painstakingly piece together. To guide our journey today, we're going to break down reading into 5 key pillars. First, the mechanics of reading. Second, decoding the writer's intent. Third, factual versus imaginative texts. Fourth, making logical inferences. And finally, mastering comprehension questions. Let's jump straight into Section 1, the mechanics of reading, specifically focusing on speed and vocalization. You know, the difference between poor and successful reading habits often boils down to one simple thing: vocalization. It's the hidden villain that's slowing you down. When you form the sounds of each word with your lips, even if it's just muttering under your breath, you're severely limiting your speed. Just think about the physical mechanics of it for a second. The average person speaks at about 150 words per minute, but your brain can process information so much faster than that. When you vocalize, you're literally tethering your brain's massive processing power to the physical speed of your mouth. So the ultimate goal here is true silent reading. We want to train ourselves to read solely with our eyes and our mind. All right, moving on to Section 2, decoding the writer's intent, using the rhetoric framework. Now that we're reading silently, we need to recognize that reading is actually a conversation. Someone wrote that text for a specific reason, so you've got to act as an active decoder. Put on your detective hat and really interrogate the author's choices by asking 3 crucial questions. You can't just passively absorb words on a page, you have to investigate. Ask yourself, why did the author write this? What exactly have they written? Like, what's their main thesis? And how have they gone about writing it? How did they structure their argument to actually make their point? To really uncover that why, you have to tune in to the author's tone. Tone is the voice in which the writer speaks to the reader, reflecting their attitude, their feelings, and their whole approach to the subject. It can reveal if they're trying to inform you, persuade you, or maybe just entertain you. Think about it. If an author is using heavy sarcasm and you read their words completely literally, you've entirely missed the boat. Tone is the emotion behind the ink. It's the specific language and phrasing that projects whether the writer is feeling humorous, sad, indignant, or friendly. And to figure out the how, we need to understand the difference between function words and content words. Function words establish relationships and organize the parts. Words like as, in, at, and but. Think of them as the mortar holding a brick house together. They are the essential architecture providing those crucial transitions between ideas. Meanwhile, content words are the actual bricks. They are central to the main meaning and the subject. A really successful reader tracks how an author might swap out these key content bricks with synonyms or antonyms to build their argument as the text moves along. Let's shift into Section 3, factual versus imaginative texts. What's super fascinating here is how a good reader actually shifts gears depending on the landscape of the text. Because, let's be real, you wouldn't read a manual for assembling a bookshelf the same way you'd read a gripping psychological thriller, right? With factual texts, things dealing with reports, statistics, and logical step-by-step arguments, you need logic. Your focus is on the structural blueprint. But when you switch over to imaginative texts, like creative writing or fiction, you're looking for the soul. You're looking for those subtleties and stylistic effects. You have to look a lot deeper at the images, the emotions, and the underlying implications. Take this line from Dylan Thomas as a perfect example of imaginative metaphorical language. My uncle blew and bugled whenever he wanted cards. The writer isn't just handing us a dry fact here, he's giving us a vivid, almost cinematic experience. Now, the uncle didn't literally have a bugle instrument in his hands. Instead, the word bugled is used metaphorically. It suggests a noise that's high-pitched, strident, sudden, loud, and triumphant. The writer uses that specific word to make the image incredibly vivid and convey a much greater total impression. I mean, a literal dry word like exhaled or sighed just wouldn't capture that sudden, loud triumph of a bugle, right? And this is exactly why it matters. Active decoders don't just skip over weird or unusual words. They actually pause to appreciate the specific flavor the author intentionally injected into that sentence. That brings us to Section 4, making logical inferences, or reading between the lines. This is really the highest level of reading, making logical inferences based on clues rather than just relying on direct statements. Let's test this out with a quick scenario straight from the source material. Imagine you read this sentence. Sohail always sits in the last row of the classroom. Okay, what logical inference can we make from that one single piece of information? I actually want you to guess the answer in your head before we move on. Based strictly on that single sentence, which of these 4 assumptions is the most logical jump? Does Sohail dislike his college courses? Is he totally unprepared for his class? Does he feel uncomfortable sitting in the front row? Or is he simply farsighted? So, the answer? We can logically conclude that Sohail feels uncomfortable sitting in the front row. The other answers just jump to completely unsupported conclusions. The crucial point here is that your inferences absolutely must be supported by clues and logic. In reading comprehension, you can't let your imagination override the actual evidence on the page. The sentence doesn't tell us a single thing about how he feels about the coursework or how well he sees. It only tells us his seating preference. Therefore, concluding he simply feels uncomfortable in the front is the strongest inference, because it totally avoids the trap of making wild, unsupported guesses. Finally, let's head into our last section, Mastering Comprehension Questions, where we really test your understanding. The source breaks down the assessment of your reading into 7 distinct types of comprehension questions. They range from the baseline stuff, like meaning and context, or identifying basic stated facts, all the way up the staircase to high-level critical thinking, things like making logical inferences, interpreting metaphorical language, analyzing stylistic choices, summarizing main points, and finally expressing a personal opinion. And guys, context is literally everything. For example, when you're tested on meaning, you must always look at the surrounding context. Like knowing that if a town says they are executing a redevelopment plan, they mean they're going to carry it into effect. They aren't taking the city blueprints to the guillotine for capital punishment. If you just grab the very first dictionary definition that pops into your head without looking at the rest of the sentence, your comprehension is going to completely derail. Ultimately, the highest level skill isn't just memorizing and reciting facts. The ultimate goal of all this work isn't just to pass some multiple choice test. It's about forming and justifying your own personal opinion about the text, regardless of being officially right or wrong. You might be asked if you think an author's argument is convincing, or maybe to share your own experience on a related topic. The goal here isn't to be universally right. It's to successfully justify your stance using the text as your rock-solid foundation. So as you walk away from this explainer today, I want to leave you with a challenge and a pretty provocative question. Are you reading with your lips, or are you actively interrogating the writer's mind? The next time you pick up a text, ask yourself, are you just letting the author speak at you, or are you finally ready to talk back?